Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in this lecture, we are going to look at the properties of cell. Cells are complex and highly organized structure that contain numerous internal structures. And some of these internal structures, they are membrane-bound organelles, while others do not. Some of the membrane-bound organelles that are found in a cell, we have nucleus, we have Golgi body, we have mitochondria. All are examples of membrane-bound organelles, while others are not membrane-bound organelles. And very importantly, second properties of a cell, apart from the cells are complex and highly organized, cells they also contain a genetic blueprint and machinery to use it. And this genetic blueprints is DNA, and the DNA are made up of thousands of the genes. And what are these genes? Genes are instructions for a cells to create specific proteins. So this genetic blueprint, it is the DNA that are found in a cell, and the cell contains genes, and each of the genes is responsible to create a specific proteins. Like for example, we have hemoglobin gene which produce hemoglobin protein. We have melanin genes which produce melanin protein. And all cells use the same types of information. Bacterial cell, human cells, dog cells, chicken cells, they all contain same types of information. And these types of information is the DNA. And of course, the information we are talking about, it can be genetic code. So the genetic code is universal. It is the same across all species of living. And we have about 64. We have about 64 genetic codes. 3 of these genetic codes, they are called stop codons. And very importantly, ladies and gentlemen, 3 nucleotide sequences are responsible for coding a specific amino acids. Like for example, we have A, U, G. This is a triplet codons. So this one, 1, 2, 3. So there are 3 bases, and we call them genetic code. And each of these genetic code is responsible for coding a specific amino acid. Like AU gene is responsible for coding methionine. Methionine. Methionine is an amino acid. So this is the genetic code, and we have 64 of them, which are responsible for coding 20 amino acids that are found in proteins. So it's responsible for coding 20 amino acids that are found in proteins, and we have 64 of them. So this is what you call genetic code, and it's the same across all species of living organisms. The machinery used for the synthesis is interchangeable. So because they use the same machinery, the machinery that we use across all eukaryotic cells, we need DNA polymerase, we need ribosome, we need transfer RNA for the protein synthesis. So it is universal across all species of living organisms. And this information transfer must be error-free. So as you are transferring information from genes to protein, there is no need for any error. So it should be, or it must be error-free. And if there is an errors, the errors are called mutations. That is from the DNA, RNA, because we have what we call central dogma of molecular biology. We started from DNA. So when DNA replicates itself to another molecule of DNA, the process is called replication, and then the DNA can be converted into messenger RNA, and then the messenger RNA will be converted into proteins. So along the way, you see there is a transfer of information from DNA to RNA and from RNA to proteins. So this transfer of information must be error-free. And if from the DNA to proteins, or if from DNA to replication, there is an order and errors, because what actually happened, the DNA first replicate itself, then the replicated products produce mRNA, and proteins. So this is what we call the genetic flow or the transfer of information. But if along the way there is an error, so these errors are called mutations, which can be a problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is two important, or these are some of the two basically important properties of the cell. The cells are complex and highly organized. And number two, cells contain a genetic blueprint and machinery to use it. So, as we say, cells are highly organized and contain numerous internal structures, and some of these internal structures are membrane-bound organelles, while others are not. Cells have a genetic blueprint and machinery to utilize it effectively in transferring the information from DNA to protein, to RNA, and then from RNA to proteins. So let's look at the genetic blueprint and information. So genes provide instructions for creating specific proteins, as I mentioned. So there are genes in the DNA which are responsible for producing a specific proteins. Like for example, in humans, we have about 25,000. We have approximately about 25,000 genes. We have about 25,000 genes in humans, and each of these genes is responsible for creating specific proteins, and these proteins are responsible for the physiological functions of each and every cells they are found or they are present in. And all cells, they are using the same genetic code and similar synthesis machinery, the transfer RNA, the messenger RNA, the ribosomal RNA, the replicating machinery like the RNA polymerase, the DNA polymerase. They are all same and similar across all species of living organism. And very importantly, this is where we have the genetic blueprint. We have a nucleus, and inside the nucleus we have chromosome, and this is the chromosome. So chromosome is made up of different components. We have telomere, we have centromere, and we have, of course, another telomere. So a telomere is a repetitive sequence of nucleotide that found at the end of or at the tail end of the chromosomes, and the major role of this telomere is to protect the DNA in the chromosome. And then, of course, as we can see, the genetic blueprint is the DNA, and it is located in the nucleus, and it's wrapped off in a structures which is called the chromosome. So the DNA is wrapped off in the structures which is called chromosomes. So the DNA is tightly packed and wrapped with the histone proteins, and the structures is called chromosome. So in humans, we have 46 chromosomes, which is 23 pairs in every cell. Like for example, in humans, we have approximately about 37.2 trillion cells, and each of these cells contain 46 chromosomes. So accurate information transfer is essential. And if there is any errors, so that errors are called mutations, which can lead to a lot of issues, a lot of problems. Of course, mutations generally lead to variation and evolution. So, cell origin and division. Cells origin from the division of pre-existing cells. Like for example, you cannot actually produce cells from the non-existing cells. So all cells come from pre-existing cells. The dog cells come from the dog's parent. The human cells come from human cells. The chicken cells come from chicken parent cells. So all our cells, we all inherited. All our cells are originated from our parent. So if you really want to know the cells of your child, so look at the cells of your parent. That is why there is genetics. And of course, part of the cellular theory we are going to look at is that a cell theory, or a theory that all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. So one of the important theory of a cell, that each and every living organisms are composed of one or more cells. So those organisms that have one cell, they are called unicellular, and those that have more cells, they are called multicellular. So this is for you to understand that the fundamental unit of life is a cell, and that's which originated from pre-existing cells. So here there are about 3 cellular theory. First, all living organisms are composed of one or more cells, and cells are the fundamental unit of life is another theory, and also cells are all originated from pre-existing cells. So the daughter cells inherit genes from their mother cells during cellular division. So that is why all cells come from pre-existing cells. So the daughter cells came from the mother cells, and all the genes that are present in the mother cells are inherited by the daughter cells during cellular division. And this process ensures continuity of genetics information across generations. So this process of the division and the inheritance of the cells as well as the genes from our parent is what actually ensures the continuity of genetics information. That is why we look like our parent, we look like our grandparents. So types of cellular division. So cellular division can occur both in eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. So in a prokaryotic cells like bacteria, binary fission is the types of a cellular division which involves a simple cell splitting. So the bacteria will split itself into two, and that is how it divides itself. As we can see from here, this is the original parent. So we have the DNA. Then in step 1, the nucleus of the cell start dividing itself, and later on, nucleus divided, and then finally, at the cut step, the two cells completely divide itself like this. So most cells produce through some sort of a cell division. So prokaryotic cells divide through a simple form of division called binary fission, and this is where it is. So one cell will divide itself first, the nucleus of that cells will divide itself, and later on, then the cells will completely divide itself. So there are 3 processes that involve this cellular division. The single neck strand split and form a duplicate of itself. So like for example, you see this is the DNA. So the single double-stranded DNA divides itself and forms a duplicate of itself. And then the 2 copies move to opposite side of a cell. And then the cell finishes into 2 new and identical cells called daughter cells. So cell wall then forms if applicable after the division for those that have cell wall. And then mitosis, in the case of eukaryotic cells, the type of cellular division is through mitosis, which produces identical daughter cells for growth and repair. So one cell divides itself to produce identical daughter cells. And the major aim of the cells produced from mitosis is for growth and repair. And then the next cellular division also still applied in eukaryotic cell is meiosis. So meiosis reduces the genetic content by half and produces genetically unique cells for reproduction. So meiosis usually takes place in the reproductive cells, which is sperm and egg cells. So through fertilization is where we have meiosis, where the sperm cells and the egg cells reduce their genetic content by half and then recombined and produce a daughter cells. So this is meiosis, and it occurs in reproductive cells, that is sperm and egg cells during fertilization. So what are the inheritance of organelles? Daughter cells inherit cytoplasm and organelles from mother cells. So that is how it happened. The daughter cells inherit their organelles and cytoplasm from their parent. So in asexual reproductions, organelles are passed directly from mother to daughter. That is in the case of sexual reproduction. But in sexual reproduction, organelles predominantly come from one parent, often the egg cell. So that is what happened in sexual reproduction. Like for example, if you take mitochondria, the mitochondria of our cells, we inherit them directly from our mothers. This is actually some of the organelles where we have cytoplasm and other organelles in both plant cell and animal cells. So we inherit them from mother to the daughter. So organelles are first directly you see from the mother. mother to the daughter. So most of the cellular organelles like the cytoplasm and other organelles, we inherit them from the mother cells, not father cells. Get it right. So organelles predominantly come from one parent, not from both parents, often the egg cells, so mostly from the egg cells of the mother. So mitochondria, let's look at the mitochondria and chloroplast inheritance. Mitochondria and chloroplasts are inherited from the egg cell in eukaryotes. So therefore, the mitochondria in our cells, we inherit them directly from the egg cells of the eukaryotes, that is from our mother egg cells. So that is why now, especially in DNA fingerprinting, the best thing to do is you can actually use the DNA from the mitochondria, especially in maternity disputes. If you want to know our mothers, we can actually isolate our mitochondrial DNA and get the mitochondria from our mothers. Then we run the gel electrophoresis, and from there, if they are really our mother, then of course it will give the same pattern of the band. So these inheritance patterns helps trace the evolutionary origins of organism. So based on these inheritance patterns, we can trace the evolutionary origin of an organism based on the mitochondrial and the chloroplast inheritance. So you see, this is the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. So mitochondria are present in most eukaryotic cells. Mitochondria convert the chemical energy stored in foods into compounds that are more convenient for cells to use. So you see, the mitochondria is a part of the cells that converts the chemical energy like glucose, lipids into more convenient form for the cells to use. And the convenient form here is energy, that is the ATP. And the mitochondria has two membranes, and it inherited maternally, meaning that we inherit mitochondria from our mothers. So both chloroplast and mitochondria contain their own genetics information in small DNA molecules. So both the chloroplast and mitochondria, they have their own DNA. So these organelles are crucial for energy production and photosynthesis. So energy production is usually take place in the mitochondria, while photosynthesis and energy generation take place in chloroplasts. So now the next thing is energy acquisition and use. So most cells perform respiration to release energy from organic compounds. So most of the cells, they use cellular respiration to release energy from the organic compounds like glucose, lipids, carbohydrate, and proteins. In general, they are the organic compound. So respiration generally converts organic molecules into carbon dioxide and oxygen. So this is some of the cellular respiration. So the cellular respiratory mechanisms is of three steps. So we have three steps of cellular respiration. We have glycolysis, as we can see it from here. This is glycolysis, number one. Then number two, we have Krebs cycle. And then, of course, you see glycolysis is where we have the glucose converted into pyruvic acid. And then the pyruvic acid, as you can see, is converted into, it actually undergo Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle produce ATP and NADH. And then the NADH and FADH will undergo or will enter the third step of cellular respiration, which is electron transport chain. So through electron transport chain, ATP are generated. So at the end, you see, it is actually the organic compound, like the foods and oxygen, will enter into the cell. And then the cell in the cytosol, where we have the glycolysis will take place, which is the first step of cellular respiration, where glucose will be converted into pyruvic acid and NADH. So then the pyruvic acid will be converted into NADH in the second step of cellular respiration, which is Krebs cycle. And then the NADH and FADH generated from glycolysis and Krebs cycle will enter into third step of cellular respiration, which is electron transport chain, in order to generate energy. So cells produce ATP, and the ATP is the energy currency needed for various activities. So the various activities that we do is due to the energy produced from the food that we are taking in the form of ATP. So the ATP is the energy currency that we needed for various activities. So then the next thing is chemical reactions. What are the chemicals? So all these are the properties of a cell. We talk about the organization of the cell. The DNA blueprint is also another properties of the cell. We talk about the inheritance of a cell. And then now from the previous slide, we talk about the energy acquisition and it is used in a cell. So then the next thing is chemical reaction in cells. So cells transform simple molecules into complex ones through anabolic process. So one of the properties or one of the chemical reactions in a cell, we have anabolic process, where a simple molecules, smaller ones, join themselves with the input of energy to produce a complex ones. So, and then the another reaction in a cell, the organic molecules also break down to release energy in catabolic reactions. So we have, apart from anabolic reactions, then we have catabolic reaction in a cell where a complex molecule break down to release energy. And then overall, metabolism encompasses all chemical reactions within a cell. So in total, when we have both anabolism and catabolism taking place in a cell, so that process is called metabolism. So metabolism encompasses all the chemical reactions that taking place within a cell. And as we can see, ladies and gentlemen, you see, this is where we have proteins, lipid, carbohydrate break down into smaller, as we can see, into smaller to produce heat and energy. So the process is called catabolic pathways. And then at the same time, if you can see from here, these smaller molecules join themselves together to produce also a larger one. Okay, look at it, smaller one here. Look at it, the smaller molecules plus ATP join together to produce a macromolecule that is the larger one. And then the process is called anabolic pathways. So what are the mechanical activities of a cell? Cells are capable of movement. Cells are capable of movement and can move their organelles. So the cells, they have the ability to move from one place to another, and they can also move their organelles. And very importantly, cells can respond to stimulus or to stimuli. They can respond to chemicals, which is called chemotaxis. They can respond to water, which is hydrotropism or hydrotaxic, and it can respond to various stimuli and enabling adaptation and survival. So if a cells realize that there is a danger approaching them, so they always respond to that stimuli and change a direction. And that is what enabling adaptation and the continuation of the survival of those cells. Examples include movement toward chemicals. So you can have cells to move toward chemicals, and that is why it calls chemotaxics. And they can respond to lights. So cells can respond to light, like for example, plants during photosynthesis. So the response of a plant or cells to light is called phototropism. And they can also, examples of the chemicals that can be responded by the cells, like hormonal response and touch. So the basic properties of a cells, we have 6 of them, as we can see. Number 1, cells acquire and utilize energy. That is number 1. Cells carry out a variety of chemical reactions. We mentioned this, making 2. Cells engage in mechanical activities is also another properties. Cells are able to respond to stimuli is also another property. So you see here we have 4. And if you didn't forget, we talk about the cells are highly organized, and also the cells contain genetic blueprint. So making a total of 6 properties of a cell. And the next thing is cell regulation. So cell regulation is also another properties of a cells. So cells regulate activities such as DNA synthesis to control growth and reproduction. And then also a proper regulation ensures that cell functions and also prevent errors. So if there is a proper regulation of the cells, It ensures an effective cellular function, and also it prevents errors, that is mutation. So this control is vital for maintaining cellular and organismal health. So if the activities of the cell is tightly regulated, so it means that our cells will be healthy and the entire organisms will also be healthy. And the regulation of cellular cycles, or the regulation of cellular activities, it usually occur during cell cycles, because we have different checkpoints where cells check if there is any problem, and then the problem will be repaired before the continuation of cellular cycle. So what are the different checkpoints where the activities of the cells, and also checking whether there is an error? We have spindle assembly checkpoint is one of the checkpoints, and at this point the cells check for chromosome attachment to spindle, and if there is no proper chromosomal attachment, it means that there is an error. So this is one of the checkpoints. And then the G2 checkpoints. The G2 checkpoints. At the G2 stage, the cells check for the cell size and then the DNA damage. It will check if there is any problem with the DNA, and also it usually also check if there is any problem with the size of the cell. Then we have checkpoint 1. At checkpoint 1, the cells usually check for cell size and also the nutrient, the growth factors, and DNA damage. So these are the 3 major checkpoints in cell cycles that trying to make sure that there is a tightly proper cellular regulation in order to prevent errors, and also to maintain cellular growth and organismal health. So in summary of cell functions, cells are complex units that perform energy production, chemical reaction, movement, and regulation, and they inherit genetics information and pass it through division or inheritance. Proper functioning depends on accurate information transfer. So what are the cell parts and their functions? That is the next video that we are going to look at. So ladies and gentlemen, this is actually the properties of the cells. I hope you enjoy this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and join my YouTube community.